Welcome to the Planning Policy Local Plan Committee meeting, 27th of February. Going through the agenda, I will go to inform. Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. I can report apologies for absence this evening from Councillors Bush, Scott and Fowler. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 2 is the minutes of last meeting. Have you all had a chance to look, see if they're on a true record and if you're happy for me to sign them? Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah. Agenda item 3 is declaration of interest. Someone got hands fairly.
Yeah, only that I'm ward councillor for Ardley in relations. Item 8.
Item 4, question or notice pursuant to council procedure rule 38. Do we have any tonight?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 5 is public speakers. I can't see anyone in the crowd unless they're hiding somewhere that I can't see them. So I think we have no public speakers. Thank you. Agenda item 6 is report to the Director of Planning, A1 Neighbourhood Plans Update, which is on page 13 and 20. And I think it's in the hand of Will. As here.
And I can never do these things correctly. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Chairman. Hello, welcome. Yes, so members will most likely recall that I think the tail end of 2022, it was allowed that this committee would send neighbourhood plans to Cabinet for a 6-week consultation. Now, the two plans arrived slightly at different times, and so that they progressed with slightly different time periods. The Ardley neighbourhood plan, their consultation ran over the summer last year. A number of consultation comments were received, nothing amazingly significant really. The examiner was then appointed, and that was a negotiation between the district council, the parish council, and a choice of different examiners. Miss Anne Skippers was chosen to examine the Ardley neighbourhood plan. She also examined the Alsford plan a couple of years ago, so we know that she was a good choice. As is usual with these things, the examiner published her matters, issues and questions, and that kind of resulted in a few procedural matters coming up, most notably of which was the fact that a point of specificity really is that we as the district council didn't formally ask Natural England whether they agreed with the habitat regulation assessment that accompanied that plan. That meant we had to go back to Natural England, Historic England and the Environment Agency and ask all three consultees whether they agreed. So that happened at the end of last year, late last year. They came back and said they did. And then that became a formal decision by the council that the habitat regulations was fine, and that in itself needed to be consulted on formally. So earlier this year, the examiner asked us to formally consult on the habitat regulations and on the changes to the National Planning Policy Framework that came out in December last year, and also to publish the examiner's major modifications. So there were three things. So that meant we had to have a 6-week public consultation that's actually now still running. It's been running for a few weeks. It actually closes on the 4th of March. So that examination is progressing well. Nothing amazing particularly has come up, just procedural matters really. The modifications proposed are, I mean, I think in the district council's view, fairly kind of minor stuff really. I think the major thing the examiner really proposed was about removing references to the garden community, making the garden community DPD and the neighbourhood plan two very specific different plans. So that was that. Next steps for Ardley. Once the examination closes, the parish council have to comment on any representations received, and then after that point, the examiner will prepare her report, and that will be submitted to us. If we're all happy, that goes to a referendum, and then that comes back to us, back to the council, to be adopted by cabinet. So that's where that is. So that's all of Ardley. Elmstead Market is the other neighbourhood plan that's in with us at the moment. They came in a little bit later, and because of the local elections last year, it meant that cabinet was pushed back a little bit, and so they didn't actually get their 6-week public consultation until the end of this year, or the kind of winter. Once again, that was a kind of a fairly similar thing. The examiner that was appointed for that examination was John Slater, so an examiner that we've not used before. He seems very good, seems very professional. He, like the other examiner, provides us with matters, issues and options, matters, issues and questions. And out of that, it came out that the examiner would like to hold a hearing. Now, most of these examinations for neighbourhood plans run with written representations, with a series of letters being exchanged between the district council and the examiner. But this examiner wanted to actually meet in public, and so an examination hearing was held on the 8th of February, just a couple of weeks ago, at Elmsted Market Village Hall, Community Centre. And it was a number of very specific questions the examiner wanted answers to. So it wasn't just a kind of a debate about what do we think, guys, isn't this great? It was a kind of, there was 5 specific points. The first 2 were really around sites that weren't included within the settlement development boundary that their site owners wanted them to be. So there was some debate about kind of why the sites weren't included and whether it would be better if they were. The next point was in regard to wording of a specific planning policy, and that was the policy that deals with land to the west of the village and east of the garden community, that kind of green gap area. I think the point the examiner was trying to get to the bottom of was, why was the wording of that policy neighbourhood plan different to the policy wording in the development plan document? In the development plan document, it was a bit more, it allowed for more uses, where the parish council, I think, wanted to control those uses a bit more, so that they were a bit more strict. So there was some debate about that and what the wording was used and X and Y. So that was that. The fourth point was about the quantum of development actually sitting on the community centre site, because members will recall that as well as the neighbourhood plan being submitted to us, they submitted a neighbourhood development order. Now, it's similar to an outline planning application, but it's done by the neighbourhood planning regulations. So what that means is that when the neighbourhood plan itself gets adopted, they get outline consent at the same time. So they have this order that's produced, and it has a kind of a broad outline of what the development's like on site. So this point was about, can they actually fit on their site all they want to have on site? So that's parking, the new building itself, which is essentially 9 apartments, open garden space, and things like bike stalls and rubbish collection. So can all that fit on site? And there was some debate whether that site was actually big enough and could it actually fit. And the upshot of that was that the inspector wanted the parish council to go back and reconsider whether that was feasible, and to come back to us and to potentially do some more drawings and work out whether that's possible. So that was that. And the last point at the examination, at the hearing, was about the conditions that were proposed to be submitted with the neighbourhood development order. So like a planning application where you have conditions, there are conditions on the neighbourhood development order, and there was a bit of a debate as to whether the conditions were acceptable. So I thought the neighbourhood plan hearing went really well. I mean, just go off track a little bit, but it really showed that this was the first time the council went through the neighbourhood development order process. So it's a whole new process to us. I think we proved ourselves very, very well. We're totally competent and we can actually do these things. So I think it's worth noting that it's a brand new thing for us, and we did really well. For Elmsted Market, the next steps, the examiner has asked us to do a few additional points. So as well as the new drawings that the parish need to submit, we also need to write to everybody who wrote to us at the consultation to ask them whether the newly published National Planning Policy Framework makes any difference, and then the same kind of questions about habitat regulations that Ardley dealt with. So it's a very similar questions put to us each time. Once all that comes back, I'm imagining the examiner will make a decision whether to proceed, and they will probably submit a report detailing what the next steps are going to be. So I imagine that's going to be probably for Elmsted probably 4 or 5 weeks' time. So yes, both examinations are progressing well. It's really for members to note, really. So we aren't specifically asking any amazing points here, but I'm happy to take any questions. The recommendations are to be found on page 14, so I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you, Will, for your presentation, and save me reminding members that an update sheet has been circulated on the neighbourhood plans, specifically the Elmstead one, where it's quite unusual to hold an examination in public for the neighbourhood plan. And before I go to questions to members, I would like to understand whether the reasons besides conflict with the policies within the DPD, was it because there was an objection from a landowner that who obviously felt aggrieved that the land was not had been included? And also I'd like to understand the cost of having held the inquiry, who bears the brunt of that, because obviously we all know inspectors are quite not cheap commodity to shift from wherever they come from to the area. But I'd like to really pay homage to both Ardleigh and Elmstead for having progressed such a cumbersome exercise into getting to the stage that they have. I think with Alresford, they will kind of almost create a ribbon on the north part of the district, where we have seen a great deal of development with plenty more to come. And I think it's understandable that they want to keep as much green gap between the developments and where they're trying to do their new building. So if you like to take that, then I'll go to members to see any questions.
Yeah, so in regard to cost, it's not 100% clear. I imagine there'll be a cost for the examiner had 2 nights in Colchester in a hotel here, because he had to come down from, I think it was somewhere like the Lake District. He came from away, and then there was obviously a day's rate, which I believe is something like £700, £600. That's just the flat rate of what it costs. I'm not entirely sure who's going to be paying for that. I'd kind of like it if it was the parish council, but we'll have a bit of a fight about that maybe at some point later. What was your other point, Councillor?
I don't know if you...
Yeah, no, that's a good point, really. You're right that these 99% of the time are held by written representations rather than hearings. I kind of suspect in this instance it was to do with the fact that it was a neighbourhood development order rather than just a straight plan, and so I think that led to these it was quite a detailed debate about kind of the site itself and about what was on it. So yeah, I think before going into the examination, I kind of thought, why are we going into a hearing? But actually, when we came out, it was really quite beneficial because we got to really dig down into the real detail of it all. So yeah, I think that's why.
Thank you, Will. I understand Paul might want to have a couple of comments.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification on the costs for the examination. They are costs which are invoiced to the council, but the government provide funding, grant funding, for the preparation of neighbourhood plans to enable district councils to bear that additional resource. And so for each of the neighbourhood plans that we have been supporting through the process so far, we've had funding directly from government to cover the costs of the examiner and also the referendum that follows. So the cost.
Okay, thanks so much. Members, any questions? Councillor Casson.
For other neighbourhood plans, etc. The referendum is at least 51% of people have to vote. Now, is that taken as the ward in its entirety? Is it 51% of the, everybody on the electoral roll in that ward, or is it 51% of those that bothered to actually vote? Because what I don't want to see is neighbourhood plans that sneak through because sort of 10 people out of 1,000 have bothered to vote and 51% of those actually approve it, and everybody else in the village actually is probably negative or you know, so.
Yeah, so it is actually the turnout. So it is actually the number of people. So if there were 100 people that came and 51 voted, that would be passed. I think that you're potentially worrying over, you know, I think you're potentially worrying about a problem that doesn't exist because these neighbourhood plans are really widely publicised. There's loads of publication before we even get to see them. Ardley and Elmstead did loads of, they were at the village fetes, they went to all the schools, they knocked on doors, they posted leaflets. I mean, they did loads of public consultation. I think to see it sneak in, I don't know how anyone would not know it was happening. They've really done well on their consultation, so I can't see it sneaking through.
We'll come back. Okay with that?
Well, I was going to say, I think we have seen some very low turnouts in well-publicised elections before, and that would be, you know, a slight concern of mine that it goes through, or vice versa, someone decides that they're going to fight that plan for some, you know, reason, personal reason, and what is a very good plan that perhaps should go through doesn't because it's whipped up and, you know, 100 turnout is enough to stop a very good plan going through.
Thank you. Will, do you want to come back?
Well, yeah, I mean, my colleagues just saying here that, yeah, for Alresford, there was 483 people in favour and 18 against. I mean, I think that probably gives you some idea of the support for that one. Yeah, I don't see it as an issue myself, but yeah.
I think the question that we should really be asking if hypothetically there isn't a 51% in favour, what happens then? Gary, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, if they don't achieve a majority vote at referendum, then the council cannot adopt that neighbourhood plan. It would leave that parish council or that neighbourhood group with a decision as to whether to have another go at the process or not. But they would have to go through the full process of consultation again, and they would have to consider the costs and time involved in that. Generally speaking, I think the experience across the country is that these neighbourhood plans do find favour with local people, but in that hypothetical situation, yes, the process ends at that point, and those promoted would have to decide whether they want to have another go.
Thank you, Gary. And the other question really that has never popped up is, we're talking always, and the experience that I've seen is that there's always parish council, town council led neighbourhood plans. What happens in unparished areas?
Yeah, so unparished areas can also, they can set up what's called neighbourhood forums. So that's a group of people, it can be just residents, and it can be as small as just a street or a few houses that want to do a very small neighbourhood plan. So yeah, they can set up these neighbourhood forums to do that. So yeah, places like Clacton that don't have parishes can also work.
That's good. Yeah, thank you so much. Councillor Fairley.
Thank you, Chairman. You said yourself the process for anyone going through the neighbourhood route is hugely time consuming. I'd just like absolutely to any parish council or group that is going through this. It is so time consuming. It means such a lot to the community. Now, where are these hardly with the procedural issues in relation to the patients? Are those errors as such that have been avoided? Is it something that we didn't know about because we've only had Alresford go through previously? You know, just the second one. Can you just explain a little bit more around the reasoning behind those procedural issues?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it an error. We dealt with the habitat regulations part of the the Arlesford plan when that came in a few years ago a bit differently. When that was here, we also hadn't formally consulted Natural England, but in that instance, the parish had introduced some new policies, and so they needed to be assessed kind of anyway. And so in that case, the kind of plan as a whole was kind of reassessed the habitat regulations, whereas this time that kind of wasn't the case. It wasn't. I don't think it was a mistake on anybody's part. I just think, yeah, we probably didn't have that experience to kind of for this exact scenario to have before. So yeah, we know now.
Thank you. Would it be fair to say that perhaps the learning points be applied in future to avoid such issues happening as?
Yeah, I think it's true that we're learning a lot as we go, especially about the neighbourhood development order process. You know, that's a completely new process that we hadn't dealt with before, and I think with that in particular, we've got that really spot on, and we did all that absolutely correctly. So yeah, there's always learning to be done, but I think for at least the neighbourhood development order, we did really well.
Councillor Andy Baker, who's the Cabinet Member for Planning and Housing. See if you have any comments. Nice to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the invitation. Interesting question about non-parished areas, actually. So obviously, I live in Holland, so interesting that a street could get together and decide to have a neighbourhood plan. I don't have any comments. Interesting questions, and I'm glad to see that it's all grant funded. Thankfully, it doesn't come out of. Yeah, I'm just glad about that. Thank you.
Lovely, excellent. So, members, we are being asked to note, as on page 14, the progress of both plans. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now go to agenda item 2, which is in the hands of Paul Woods. On to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So report A2 is about the local development scheme. The local development scheme is a statutory document that the council has to produce, which sets out the predicted timetable for producing the local plan and other planning policy documents. It's like a rolling project plan, which is an overview of what documents the council intends to produce, what timelines there might be for consultations and for adopting the documents, and it also outlines the evidence-based documents that will be required to back up those policy documents. The local development scheme is updated regularly to reflect recent developments in the preparation of policy documents, and the last version was published in December 2022. Since then, the members of this committee agreed to commence the review of our local plan with the intention of submitting that updated local plan for examination by June next year. And so it's necessary to update the local development scheme to reflect that programme of work. That ensures everyone with an interest in the preparation of planning policy documents, and specifically the local plan, be they members of the council, landowners and developers, external organisations that we work with, like the NHS and the county council, as well as members of the public, all have a clear idea of when the various stages of the local plan process are going to happen and when the consultations are likely to take place. By publishing this document on the website, that information is available to everyone who wants to understand broadly what that timeline is, and they can prepare their resources accordingly so they can engage in the process more effectively. The document itself is in a fairly standard format, and it's a document that can be updated at any time to reflect changes that come about as the documents are prepared. Key points from this local development scheme are the review of the local plan, as well as the preparation of the Garden Community DPD. The timeline for both of those are on pages 32 and 33 of your agenda. The local plan review involves broadly similar stages of statutory consultation as the original local plan went through. And the timetable accounts for each of these stages up to and including potential adoption in early 2026. And similarly, the Garden Community DPD has gone through several stages of public consultation and that's now been submitted to the Secretary of State for examination by a planning inspector. And we expect those examination hearings to take place in the spring, and officers have been in correspondence with the planning inspectorate to make those arrangements. On page 35 of your agenda, the document sets out an overview of the evidence base that will be needed in preparing the local plan. In this version of the local development scheme, we've separated the evidence that we will need specifically to back up the local plan review from other evidence that remains part of our evidence base but won't need a specific update at this time. That first list begins on page 35 and the second list begins on page 39 of your agenda. One of the guiding principles that the committee agreed to back in December was that the review of the local plan would be informed by proportionate, necessary and affordable updates to the relevant technical evidence. And this principle has been applied has been followed in determining which evidence documents need to be updated and which ones don't at this time. In addition to the two key documents, the local plan and the Garden Community DPD, the local development scheme also sets out the supplementary planning documents that the council are looking to produce. And at this time, it's the Hartley Gardens SPD. And we also reference the Jaywick Sands Design Guide SPD, which was adopted in February last year. We also reference neighbourhood plans. So obviously you've had an update this evening about Elmstead and Ardley. And there's also just a brief overview of Brightlingsea, who have indicated their desire to prepare a neighbourhood plan, but haven't moved along very far through that process just yet. The Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, Mr. Gove, has asked all local planning authorities to submit an up-to-date timetable for preparing or reviewing their local plans to him by the 12th of March, 12 weeks after the publication of the newest NPPF. And so part of the recommendation this evening, as well as publishing this on our website so that it's available to the public, is to send it directly to the Secretary of State so that his department can be aware of our plans with regards to reviewing our local plan. So the local development scheme sets out how we expect to review the local plan, when the Garden Community DPD could be ready for adoption, the timeframes concerning supplementary planning documents and neighbourhood plans, as well as the evidence base that supports all of these documents. And the recommendation can be found on page 21 of your agenda. And back to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Huge amount of work has gone into that to put together a very credible but tight timetable there. Huge amount of work to be done, quite a lot of refresh and fresh evidence to be needed. I particularly like the on page 42, where there is all the risk assessment resources have been identified as opposed to being incorporated in the body of the report itself. I don't really have any specific questions on it. I've discussed that with Gary earlier in the week or last week, and I think it's a very factual piece of work that clearly defines how and when things should be happening. So I'll go to members for questions. Councillor Fairley.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Thank you for that, Paul. Firstly, you said about publicising on the website in terms of timelines. Everybody, stakeholders can see what's happening when they work accordingly. What work or programme is there to publicise that timeline outside of just pushing it on the website? That's number one.
Our statutory requirement is just to publish this online. Planning agents and landowners and developers will know to look for the documents so that they will be able to prepare their resources accordingly. We haven't historically publicised it in any further sense. We've not done a consultation on this document or done press releases or anything like that. The process of the local plan review involves various stages of public consultation. So at that point, we write to people who have registered on our consultation portal and ask to be notified. We have press releases and we interact with parish councils and other stakeholders that can help publicise the public consultations. But to this stage, we haven't done anything specifically around the local development scheme, but it's something that we can consider. And if we think it's appropriate, we could speak to the council's communications team about preparing a press release or listing something on the council's news page on the website to highlight the fact that this document's been updated.
Thank you. If that could be considered, then yeah, the approved, I think. Great. So my second question is regard to the risk assessment and the headings, the risk assessment, where they come from. Are they predetermined form that you just complete, or do you come up with the headings for the risk assessment?
So as I mentioned in the presentation, thank you, Chairman, it's a fairly standard format for the document, and these headings under the risk assessment have been in this document for some time through various iterations. And so what we would do is we look at those risks and update the assessment if necessary. And if any further risks are identified, then we will add them in as well. But at this point in the review of this document, there haven't been any additional headings added. So they're essentially headings that we have inherited from previous iterations of the document, but just updated for this one.
Thank you. I just wonder then, in that case, with the wind farm developments, PCOs that are being put in, how does that impact on this document, and should it be included at any point, perhaps within?
Yeah, of course. So the progress of those projects obviously will have an impact as we review the local plan and as we prepare other planning policy documents. I'm not sure whether it would constitute a risk to the progress of those documents, although it's a factor that we would consider. But I'd be happy to go and explore that and see whether it's a risk that needs to be assessed within the LDS explicitly.
Yeah, I mean, my questions really, I was starting to explore it with the neighbourhood, plans before, but what I wanted, there's a couple of questions. I mean, we're not actually going down the route of SIL at the moment, I understand, but if we were, I've had sort of I've got people asking me about whether we're, locally going to do a neighbourhood plan in my own ward. In the past, I think a lot of the push to do neighbourhood plans was very much a NIMBY thing, was that you did a neighbourhood plan to try and override the district plan, etc. And I think the only time that you actually saw some positivity about neighbourhood plans was in the early days of SIL, when it was being suggested that if you went down the route of a neighbourhood plan, the local community got more finance coming into their area. Now, if we were to suddenly, because looking at the sort of changing political priorities, say, as a risk, is there a risk that we will be pushed down the route of actually starting to go down the SIL route? And will that suddenly then have everybody in the district saying we must all do a neighbourhood plan, which would then perhaps put financial pressure on the council? It would put pressure on officers to be able to do all of those. And the last question really was, with the neighbourhood plans, if a neighbourhood plan started late, what I wouldn't want to see is this timetable held up, because I represent a ward that was impacted greatly when we didn't have a local plan in place last time. And that if people start doing neighbourhood plans, in the next little while, are they going to be holding up the local plan going through, or will they just take their own time and the local plan get adopted without those neighbourhood plans being in place? Because I can see that if we went down a SIL route, we might suddenly have a huge demand for doing neighbourhood plans.
Thank you, Councillor Casson, for your question. I think that's a point, again, that I think will be beneficial to all members of the council to understand what SIL might look like. And I think we are quite a way away from that. SIL, I'm pretty certain officers will put me right, it does require its own inquiries and public consultation, and followed by public inquiries. And I, for one, share your concerns because of not because you want to deprive parish council claiming their 15 or 20% if they got a neighbourhood plan off the SIL. Having produced an infrastructure delivery plan, for the whole district, that's kind of might be put in jeopardy. But I think the question you want to really is that will the resources be taken away to follow and to assess the neighbourhood plan, and will that impact on the timetable? And I think what your feelings are on Sill as well. I know what Gary's are, as we discussed it with him, but I'd be interested to see if they match.
Very much put on the spot in front of my boss. So just to pick up your first point, Councillor Cousins, about neighbourhood plans, and the guidance is quite clear that neighbourhood plans should set out a positive vision for the area. So it's not a case that they are designed to try to stop development that would otherwise be allocated in the local plan. And in fact, there needs to be conformity between the neighbourhood plan and the local plan. With regards to Sill, it's not something that the council has adopted up until this point, largely because of the amount of resources that were involved in preparing the current local plan and the amount of work that preparing a Sill entails. And you're absolutely right, Chairman, the process of preparing a Sill is similar to preparing a local plan. There are stages of public consultation. The Sill charging schedule itself is examined. There needs to be viability assessments. It's not a small undertaking. Officers have been speaking with colleagues at Essex County Council about the possibility of some grant funding being made available to assist us in preparing a Sill. And so that's something that we've been exploring. But at each stage through preparing a Sill, that would come before members for discussion and decisions at the relevant stages. Sill itself can be really beneficial, whereas with Section 106, a lot of the contributions towards infrastructure that we can get from developers are tied to larger schemes, so 10 or more dwellings, major developments. With Sill, you end up with a tariff charge per square metre of residential floor space that you create. And that means that whether you're building 500 new homes or just a single new home, you need to make a contribution towards infrastructure. And the way that is spent is determined largely by the Sill Charging Authority, which would be the District Council, and then that can be allocated to appropriate infrastructure. And it also has the advantage that that funding can be pooled. And so if there are a few developments in a certain area that would make a small contribution each, that money can then be put towards larger infrastructure projects that mitigate the impacts of a group of developments rather than just a single development. With regards to resources, if neighbourhood plans were to come forward, I mentioned earlier that we do receive grant funding from the government to mitigate some of the new burden that neighbourhood plans have placed on local authorities. And so we get funding to help with the cost of the referendum, with the cost of the examiner, but also staffing resources to be able to assist parish councils or neighbourhood forums while they're preparing those plans. The process, as we've seen with Ardley and Elmstead and also with Alresford when they did their neighbourhood plan, is quite a long process, and the early stages are undertaken by the parish or the neighbourhood forum. So it's not something that we are directly involved with right at the very beginning of that process. There is public consultation, public engagement, aiming to work and develop their plan before they submit it to us to then proceed through the process. And so although we support the parishes to do that, there's not a huge resource draw on the district council in the early stages of preparing a neighbourhood plan. And so to answer the key point, if we were to get an influx of parishes looking to develop neighbourhood plans at this stage, I don't think that there's a significant risk that it would affect the preparation of the local plan. And in fact, that's the preparation of the local plan is a corporate priority for the council. And so we'd need to ensure that we stick to this timetable as closely as we possibly can. Did that cover each of your questions, Councillor Cousins?
Yeah, no, I think it did, because I mean, I understood that normally neighbourhood plans bring forward more development rather than less. But that was my point, was that I think the initial drive for neighbourhood plans didn't happen because a lot of people realised that actually it wasn't a way to stop development. It actually probably increased development. But my point was that if we went down the Sill route, I think it might get a lot of people that hadn't bothered to do neighbourhood plans to suddenly do neighbourhood plans because there was a positive in it. Because I do think Sill actually probably is a better way forward than 106 is. But, you know, that was my point, was would we be able to cope with the extra demand if we went down that route?
Thank you, Councillor Cousins. Thank you, Paul, for answering that. But it's important to know that it is not correct. People thinking the neighbourhood plan will stop development. It's got to be in conformity with a local plan, and also the opportunity to safeguard some spaces for whatever reason the parish has, but it's not there to take away development. That's one thing that was loud and clear back in 2010, 2011, when neighbourhood plans were announced, and the Minister for Planning, Greg something or other, was the first opening gambit. Please do not think neighbourhood plans, they will stop development, because they will not. They meant completely different things. Any further questions, members? Councillor Fairley?
I was just going to say, I'd like to put a recommendation.
You have a seconder? Councillor Chapman? And before I go to that, so Councillor Baker, would you have any comments on the points raised?
Not at all, Chairman. Thank you.
Excellent. So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So we'll go to agenda item 8, which is local plan review, visions and objective revisited on page 45. It's in your hands. Gary, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening. This report presents members with an updated version of the vision and objectives from the local plan. And the vision and objectives, if you're not familiar with the current local plan, sits quite early on in the document. And essentially it paints a picture of what we hope our district will be like for the current local plan in 2033. And linked to that vision statement is a series of objectives that really relate to a range of planning related infrastructure, environmental objectives that all of the policies and proposals in our local plan are linked to in some way. So there's a sort of golden thread running throughout the local plan that really derives from the overall vision for what our district will be like in the future. Now, of course, the current local plan extends to 2033, and through the review of the local plan that we're currently undertaking, we're looking to extend that period to 2041. So as a general principle, and it was one that was discussed at the last meeting of the committee, you wouldn't necessarily expect a positive vision for our district in 2033 to change much when you'd still want it to be a positive vision, whether it's 2033 or 2041. But there are a handful of areas we've identified that may need to be reflected in an updated version of the vision objectives. So in the report, which starts on page 45, I've pulled out the specific one of the key guiding principles that we discussed and was agreed as a committee at the last meeting, was that the vision and objectives within section 2 of the current local plan adopted in 2022 will be carried forward broadly unchanged in the adopted local plan to apply to the extended period to 2041. They will, however, be amended selectively and as necessary to reflect changes in national policy, updated evidence, and the potential opportunities arising from Freeport status, particularly in relation to Harwich, Bathside Bay, and the A120 corridor. And I think key to delivering upon what is a very tight timetable for the local plan review, as discussed in Paul's report, it's key that we stick fairly firm to those guiding principles, and this is one of them. As part of the plan review process, we go through the various stages of community consultation and engagement, which starts with issues and options, where we go out to public and just get a sense from communities and anyone with an interest as to what the direction of the local plan should be, which is then subsequently followed by consultation on more detailed versions of the plan and ultimately what we consider to be the final version of the local plan to be submitted to the Secretary of State. But what we've done here is we've taken the current vision statement and objectives from the adopted local plan, and we presented them to you from page 51 with a series of tracked changes which identify with words underlined things we're suggesting we could add in to the vision. And with the crossings out, the things we suggest would be replaced or altered. So what you have there is a tracked change version of the vision. And then from page 55 is similarly a tracked change version of the various objectives that also fit within them. And in terms of highlighting some of the areas that we've suggested we might want to change, there's some broad areas that I'd highlight which are set out in the report. And the main ones really relate to Harwich and the A120 corridor, relating to the opportunities around Freeport East, the progress that's being made at Bathside Bay, which wasn't the case when we submitted the last local plan. There was no free ports. There was very little indication that anything might happen at Bathside Bay at the time, and therefore the vision around Harwich didn't reflect any of that. What we're suggesting here is that we comment a lot more on that opportunity within the vision, and you'll see that within the track changes in the statement. Implied with that, and I think it's important that members of the public and members here do understand that implied with that is the likelihood that when it comes to looking at locations for additional development going forward, and we may well need to do that as part of this local plan review, the Harwich area will be one of the main areas that officers will be assessing and analysing to determine what the potential growth could be for Harwich, to really capitalise from that economic opportunity that's arising. So you'll see that within the wording of the vision, and I think through future reports you will expect to see that we would have looked very closely at Harwich as a potential location for additional growth. We've also put more commentary in about Clacton, and particularly around the levelling up opportunities that have now arisen through the work that the council has done in partnership with others to secure funding, but also to better reflect both the opportunities within our town centre and the opportunities around growth, but also to recognise a bit more the industrial base around Clacton as well. And there are some businesses that operate from Clacton that do global trade, and they're sort of little hidden gems that not many people know about. So there's a little bit more reference to our need to support the business sector and modernisation around business premises. Another area that we've looked to focus on is Jaywick Sands, and of course last year into this year we've been working on the Jaywick Sands Place Plan, which has been well received by local people, whereas when we published the local plan last time and submitted to the Secretary of State, the Place Plan was an idea, but it hadn't been advanced at that point. So now we can reflect in a bit more detail on the potential for rejuvenation around Jaywick Sands, building on what's already happened, including the Sunspot scheme. The garden community element of the vision is something we've had to look at again, because of course, as it stands at the moment, we have a local plan that's in two parts. Part one of the local plan includes a vision statement. Part two of the local plan includes a vision statement, and if we are combining the two into one single document, we've made changes to ensure that the vision from section one of the local plan is not lost, and that is reflected in the vision before you tonight. But we've also been able to comment a bit more on how that project has advanced through the process, and we're clearer on the future of that than we were at the time of the last local plan. Where possible, we've also taken the opportunity to ensure that the vision reflects corporate priorities and the corporate vision going forward. But also we know that there are new requirements around biodiversity net gain and the ecological side of the planning process, and to an extent That's reflected in updates to the vision, but it will be reflected in a lot more detail when we get into the body of the local plan and the policies that I will be suggesting that we include through review. And nobody is completely immune from the odd spelling mistake and grammatical error, even in an adopted local plan that's been heavily scrutinised by an independent government inspector. So where we've spotted that things don't quite read right, we've taken the opportunity to correct some of those little glitches as well. The main changes suggested here are within the vision. We've also got objectives. No significant changes being suggested to those. As officers, we feel that they broadly reflect what the local plan needs to cover in terms of policy coverage. But if I was to pick on any specific area where we have made some changes around climate change and just made sure that that statement is a bit more reflective of modern day thinking going forward. And of course, we've changed the dates so that they apply to the period of 2041, which is the carried forward period. Our intention would be that this revised vision would form part of the consultation we do at the initial issues and options stage, so that we get feedback from the public and anyone that's got an interest to make sure that we're on the right lines. I'd be surprised if anybody comes back with anything hugely different, but you never know. And it provides that opportunity for people to do that. Chairman, if I can direct members to the recommendation, which is on page 48, and sort of just highlight some key elements of that. So the recommendation is really to note the content of the report, consider the track changes, so the comments on the vision and objectives that officers are suggesting as changes. We're seeking your agreement tonight that the updated vision and objectives within the additional amendments that you suggest and agree be included for public consultation when we do that issues and options stage with the public. And that off the back of that resolution, we actually invite the Cabinet to comment on and amend, if necessary, the vision and objectives agreed under C before they're published as part of the issues and options consultation. And that's just a sense check to ensure that we have alignment with the corporate vision that has been progressed by the Cabinet. Chairman, thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Gary, thank you very much for your usual comprehensive presentation. And it is a very prudent and sensible way to move forward. Let's not forget that this plan was unanimously supported by very little objections not that long ago. So it would be very perverse that if anything crept out of the woodwork to tell us otherwise. I think you've highlighted the main areas. Just really wanted to have a couple of questions, and many people may not be aware of the work that's been done on stewardship on the garden communities, because the likelihoods of the progression there, it will be that Ardleigh and Elmstead will be losing some of the, or not losing, will be giving up some of the land to the garden community and to whatever model of stewardship that's going to come forward. Let's not forget that could be one of the largest communities that we will have in the district. I know we've got 3 or 4, but we're one of those, and that'd be quite good to, if you just give some meat on that. And the biodiversity, again, of course, stays very, very good on members' briefing the other evening. That way we all learned what the new duties are, and obviously that will form a major part of our changes in our new revised plan. The other third thing which I really wanted to highlight was that it's great to see Harwich, Freeport East and the A120 corridor, but there is a an incredibly sizable development happening before our very eyes in Horsley Cross. Now, when I first arrived in this authority in 2007, Horsley Cross was the poison chalice, if you like. You know, it was in, it was out, was in, was out. An inspector didn't want to see it, but then crept back in again. But now it's actually been developed and services have been laid on, which was always the stickling point to give it any importance. So that would be quite good if we were to reflect the presence of what's happening. I believe it's going to be the largest commercial development and the most up-to-date technology-wise in the district. So it would be quite an important area for us to highlight, which will link the A1, would fit in with the A120 corridor and with, kind of exploring what can be done in that location and that part of the district, really. So there's just those three things before I go to members and with you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So yes, stewardship and the garden community. Now, clearly a key principle of going for a new settlement garden community is that it's underpinned by different kind of stewardship arrangements than the traditional ones. And what we have been learning over the last few years, really, is how different models of stewardship can be adopted, and how, depending on the nature of the development, the nature of the community, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And there's sort of different elements to stewardship. There's the management of assets, there's the looking after the open spaces, the running of the community halls. There's also the governance side of things and what role the community has in that stewardship as well. And we've learned that there are different models, some that keep the governance and the management side by side, but somewhat separate. There are certain models that do both. Some areas have actually started new town or parish councils for those areas, and others have sort of set up trusts, other working forums that ensure that there is also community representation alongside the management arrangements. And we're not quite in a position to decide what the right approach for the garden community is, but we have been taking advice, and we've been researching a lot of the examples we know about and learning from some of the good practice and the not so good practice that we've learned. But in terms of Elmstead and Alresford and the possibility that there might be a different parish or town council in the future, one of the key things to remember, Ardleigh, sorry, to get the hairs racing there, anyone on screen, Ardleigh and Elmstead, and the possibility that there might be some form of another town or parish council set up in the future. What to remember is that you have to have a community in the first place to set up a town or parish council. And of course, with the garden community, the people that we will be taking soundings from in 15, 20, 30 years are not necessarily the same people that we consult and talk to today. It will be a new group of residents that might have their own ideas and aspirations about how the community should be managed and governed. So that's an important thing to bear in mind as we move ever closer to having more clarity around stewardship in the garden community. On biodiversity net gain, yes, there was a useful briefing for members. I think that there's more clarity now around how that is supposed to operate. And I think there is more clarity around the opportunities for landowners to be a part of the biodiversity net gain story. It's not just something that the council has to sort out on its own. It's something where landowners have the opportunity to be involved. And what we're seeing is there is a statutory requirement now for 10% net gain, which will be rolled out in full by the time we get to April. But there is also an aspiration amongst authorities in the Essex area to explore whether through the local plan policies we can push that percentage even higher. Although what I would say about that is viability is a key element to consider. And another thing to bear in mind as well is a lot of the development that's under construction at the moment or expected to come forward in the next few years has already got planning permission and won't be caught by these rules. So if we are looking at more ambitious targets for biodiversity net gain, we probably won't reap the rewards of those till we get towards the end of this extended period, the 2033 to 2041 kind of period. On Harwich, Freeport and Horsley Cross, I mean, there is specific reference now within the revision to the vision about Horsley Cross. In the first paragraph, after we talk about Harwich, Freeport East and the 120 corridor, that's with new development of Barside Bay, Horsley Cross and other sites with good access to the 120 and the local population. So there is a greater recognition, particularly now that development is well advanced and will soon be occupied with businesses operating from that site. Whether, as the plan progresses and we seek feedback through the consultation, whether there's a further role for Horsley Cross to play going forward is something that will be determined by this process. But we've made an explicit reference to it in the updated vision in recognition that it is a location of economic growth with physical activity now on the ground.
Thank you very much, Gary. Members, any questions? Councillor Cassins.
Right, few on the vision document, page 51. Near the bottom of the first main paragraph, the district will be home to people of all ages and abilities, providing a range of activities, attractions and facilities that will appeal to the active retired, the young and the residents of working age. Do we need active there? Because I think we should be attracting maybe the retired to become more active, because one of our priorities is health. And I think you don't want to necessarily just be attracting, the active already. You want to be attracting retired people to become more active. So I wonder whether active could be removed from there. The new paragraph in seaside towns, there's an extra A that doesn't need to be there, because there's the people of Clacton, the wider area, will have access to a modern health facilities. Should probably leave the A out and just to modern health facilities. One I didn't quite understand in the paragraph over the page on page 52, the paragraph on Frinton on Sea and Walton on the Naze, etc., to offer you a unique and non-commercialised shopping and leisure experience. I wondered what non-commercialised shopping was. I can understand maybe Radness Community Shop being, non-commercialised, but I just wonder what we're actually meaning there. I know if someone else was chairman, he would be able to explain, towns by the sea, etc. But I don't quite understand non-commercialised shopping. There's another one on page 54. Throughout the district's countryside and farming communities, the diverse variety of employment and leisure opportunities will grown up in support of. So I think we need a have there, don't we? It's the second paragraph with the underlined bits on page 54. Throughout the district's countryside and farming communities, a diverse variety of employment and leisure opportunities will grown up, so it will have grown up, I think. Yeah. Appendix 2, do you want me just to make my comments on Appendix 2 whilst we're going at it? Right. Objective 3. I like the fact that we're now talking about town centre development rather than retail town centre development, because I think the future of town centres are going to be different. To promote the vitality and viability of the town centres through promotion of retail and other related uses. I don't know whether we need related there, because I think it might be better with other uses, because I think our town centres are becoming totally different, and that by putting the word related there seems to relate only to retail, and I think we should be looking at other uses, so just drop related there. And I think probably the only controversial one that I had was over the page in infrastructure provision. We've got the one to ensure there is adequate capacity in the foul water sewage infrastructure. That is one where I think we perhaps should be more ambitious, because I think we should be looking for more than just adequate capacity. We should be looking for excess capacity to allow for future development. And I think one of the other things that we've talked about in our local plan quite a lot is excellent beaches, tourism, etc. And I think we've got a problem with sewage, etc. in our seawater. So I think we should be looking at, and I did just quickly, as I came out, come up with a line, which was to ensure there is not only adequate capacity for current needs, but capacity of foul water sewage infrastructure will be increased ahead of additional development to allow for environmental improvements, or something to that case. And that's the end of my comments on those bits.
Thank you, Councillor Castles. Gary, you made quite a lot of notes there. I think you picked all of them up, and what are your comments?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Cousins. Yeah, active retired. I think at the time when the local plan was going through, there was a sense that actually there was a bit of a stigma attached to the sort of thinking of retirement and older people coming to the district. When actually the reality of the situation is that, you know, a lot of retired people are very active in their lives, contribute a huge amount to the economy, and there's a bit of an old stigma, a sort of historic prejudice against older people, which we didn't think was appropriate to carry forward. That said, appealing to the active retired might suggest that we don't want to appeal to the less active. So as a deletion of the word active, I think if the committee are happy to accept that, I haven't got any issue with that. The access to a modern, yeah, that's a typographical error, so we can definitely accept that. Non-commercialised shopping and leisure experience. Yes, it's the words, isn't it? I think that it conjures up a picture of what we're trying to say, and what we're essentially trying to say is a shopping experience that is not dominated by international brands, something that is more bespoke to the area, that sort of kind of boutique kind of appeal of independent shops. So whether we just delete the words non-commercialised on the basis that they're a bit misleading, or if we find an alternative phrase that kind of captures that sentiment, I'm open to suggestions.
I'm going to say I wasn't sure of that, because when you look in Thorpe Soken now, we've got the picture that you were painting, perhaps. We've got lots of little independent shops, but to suggest that they're not commercial, because if they're not commercial, it's not sustainable. They're not going to be there for long.
Yes,
so
yes,
I think we do want maybe another word, because that was my thing. I know what we're I know where we're trying to go, but I don't think you could defend that very easily. You know, if we had a dispute at a planning appeal, non-commercialised shopping, I think might be a difficult word to defend, especially if people didn't know Frinton, for instance.
I think to find a bespoke, I think that will be, because then you don't generalize it. But I think you've got to be quite, you know, I think the aspiration is not to see huge amount of chains things in, because most of the villages do not really need any chains or any. Well, exactly, yeah, and that's a Sainsbury as well. But yeah, I think I'm happy maybe for you to take that away and kind of revisit it, because I think I don't expect it to come up tonight with something that we need. So, are you happy if officers take that away? Yeah, I do agree with the sentiment though, because you know our high streets are really quite unique in the way, you know, they're not like big cities, our streets, over smaller bespoke villages. So I want in your hands then, Gary.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the exclusion of the word have towards the end, opportunities will have grown up. Yes, that's a correction. Thank you very much. So we can certainly make that. In terms of the objectives around foul sewage, this is one that has come up before, and it's just a problem with the word adequate, I think, because a strict reading of the word adequate means it's right. It's the right level to meet the demands of the growth, the population, the development. So on strict reading, if it's adequate, it's correct. But I think the word adequate sort of conjures up the concept that, yeah, it's the bare minimum, isn't it? You know, if you don't achieve that, it's inadequate, as you say, and that you're doing the absolute bare minimum you can to get away with, get development up and running. So I think it's a wording issue. I think the deletion of that word would be fine, and the purpose of that passage would actually still hold up to ensure there is capacity in the foul sewage infrastructure. But we may want to add to that to ensure that growth in the district is matched with capacity, necessary capacity in the sewage infrastructure, although just deletion of the word adequate, I think, gets us where we need to go, if that would be my first suggestion. But again, I'm happy to have that debated a bit further to see if we can come up with something better.
Maybe if I can help on there, keep adequate in there, but insert upgraded capacity. That would kind of give a bit more of an emphasis on what you're trying to say, because obviously the other thing that we need to consider is there's quite a lot of campaigns now going on for the cleaner water, for bathing. There is a long list, and I responded today to one in Malwood, which we started a year and a half ago. It's now progressed towards later stages, where there is a real emphasis on water companies to clean up their acts and things. And I think that's also what you kind of alluded to as well, was it?
Yeah, I think so, because I think at the moment, if we want clean beaches and blue flags, etc., at the moment, you could argue that at the moment we have adequate capacity, but we quite clearly haven't, because as soon as you get heavy rainfall, you know, a great load goes out in the sea or into the river, etc. And I mean, we're not the worst area, because you've only got to watch the television over the last sort of couple of weeks. You know, there's various places where they're having to pump it out because they can't get rid of it since the floods. So, you know, I think that we do need to, if we're in our local plan and our corporate plan, we're looking to improve and clean our beaches up. And I mean, we've still got one beach in Clacton that regularly fails, and there's some reason for that, quite clearly we haven't got adequate capacity at present. So if we're looking to build so many houses each year, I do think we need to be almost looking to have almost an excess of capacity at any one time to allow new, because as soon as, if you've got today, if you build another 500 houses next week and they're all lived in, you suddenly have inadequate, and it takes a while for Anglian Water or whoever's dealing with, you know, that particular facility to catch up again. So I think we almost need to be ahead of it on infrastructure wise to allow it to catch up, which is why that's the only beef I had on the objective.
I suggest then, Gary, that you take that away as well, maybe circulate a set of wording for Appendix 2 and also for the shopping, commercial and non-commercial shopping experience. Is that, well, that would be a, because I mean, that needs to be a bit of thinking on that. You don't want to make thing on the hoof, do you?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to make, you know, the best we can.
Yeah. So if that's okay, I will leave that as well in the hands of officers. I think that was all your points covered, wasn't it?
Chairman, I think there was just one other that I accidentally skipped over, which was objective 3. which the deletion of the word related, to promote the vitality and viability of town centres through the promotion of retail and other related uses. The deletion of the word related would be fine. I think what we were trying to achieve there is that we don't encourage just any use in town centres. It needs to be a use that's appropriate, and you might want to consider the word appropriate instead of related. Yep.
Appropriate would be
Thank you. And on reflection of a couple of other points in terms, and we will take this away, but I'll float this as a suggestion about Frinton, about the unique non-commercialised shopping and leisure experience. And another way to approach it might be a unique, an independent shopping and leisure offer. So independent. Yeah, a unique and independent shopping and leisure offer. Okay.
I think that would be easy to defend, as a planning application as well, isn't it? We could argue that independent shops rather than non-commercialised shopping. It doesn't quite make sense.
Thank you. And then in relation to Objective 4 and foul sewage, one suggestion might be stick with the word adequate, but to ensure there is adequate capacity in the foul sewage infrastructure to meet existing and future needs.
The environmental bit again, isn't it? I think, we put so much store by our tourism and clean, excellent beaches that we all know what's happening at the moment, that
yeah.
It's making sure that we actually grab that, because this is in 2041, we want these wonderful, clean, amazing beaches, and I think we need to make sure that we achieve that.
I'll suggest something on that, Gary. I think it will be, because that's controlled by different enforcing people, or environment agents in that. I think we could say something, relate something to, we will work alongside the environment, actually name the environment agency, and water companies, to ensure that water quality, which is that is in line with our corporate aims anyway, to ensure that the water is clean, every time, every year we do go for the blue flags, and that speaks for itself, isn't it? So I think really it would be good to mention the quality of the water and the cleanliness and things, but again, that's something that good to have a discussion on that. Councillor Fairley, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, and it really relates to that point. With all of these points, there are various things that can impact and risk our vision. Is there a document for a risk assessment that sits alongside this that perhaps lists what those things might be, so do have awareness, risks might come forward and impact on our vision? And therefore, are we taking right steps to address those risks in good time, and that it's looked at as a whole? Because we can say anything we like, but unless we're actually working as in the round, we're what does it mean if we're not aware of? Not that I go on about the wind farm developments, for example. What impact is that going to have on our vision for the rural heartland? You're looking at tourism and beaches, Mark makes excellent points in terms of actually, it's not necessarily in our hands, but that risk there. So we need to be taking actions and doing work to address those risks of them becoming a problem.
Gary, would you?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I completely understand that. I think it's important to say that actually what the vision leads to is a set of policies within the local plan that are designed to deliver on that vision. And of course, though the DCO process is separate from what the council does, and there are other statutory providers, whether it be Essex or the Environment Agency, Anglian Water, that have their own powers to deliver that. When it comes to anything where the local plan is of material considerations, the policies that are in the local plan that are in turn designed to achieve that vision are a consideration. So although government on the DCO, for example, for wind turbines or pylons or any other major infrastructure projects, although they make the decision and the process is different, the presence of an adopted development plan and policies within it are a material consideration that they need to take into account, even if they aren't the be-all and end. What we need to do is keep the plan under review, really, and if the vision has to change at some point in the future, you do so through the review, but you just make sure you have robust policies in place, which we judge development proposals on, that don't take us away from the core, which is our vision for the future. It's tricky to say much more than that, really, because it is quite a high-level statement, isn't it? And when you get into the devil of the detail, it's going to apply differently depending on what the development proposal is and what the area is. But no, it's a good point to raise. Back in relation to foul sewage, it may be that to ensure there is adequate capacity in the foul water sewage infrastructure to meet existing and future needs, we might be able to add something onto that while safeguarding water quality and the special environment of the district, or the environment of the district, and that addition covers that environmental point.
I think we're up with that, and can I suggest that once it's all worded, you've had a chance to kind of word it properly, just circulate around to everyone to a degree. Councillor Chapman.
I'm just going to ask you to alter a word again on page 53. You got Lawford, Missley and Brightonsea, along with some of the larger villages, will have seen varying levels, and you've crossed off the of, and we need the of in there. Okay.
So why have I suggested that? Okay, so when we produced the local plan and we started going forward, the intention around the strategy was that levels of growth in those areas would be modest. I might have missed the point. Sorry, do correct me if I'm wrong.
Sorry, yeah, it's just it doesn't read right without that of in it. You need the
I got too keen with the crossing out pen. That's what it was.
No, you crossed it out and we need it in.
We need it back in. Thank you. I did. I got carried away there. Thank you for clarifying. I misunderstood. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman was going to have a score to say how many times Brightonsea could have been mentioned, but you haven't. So well done, dear. Any further observation, questions, members there? The one thing, Councillor Ford, Mr. Ford.
I've been demoted. I was just going to ask Chairman if I could come in after Councillor Baker's had his say on this item. Was I would just like to recommend a couple of tweaks to the recommendations in the light of the discussions. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Baker, we're talking about the percentage of biodiversity and their gain and things. Should we not be mentioning percentages of affordable housing on here, or that will be covered by policies as we progress on? because the reason I mention that, it's we have got 30%, we've not really achieved it, not to the full letters of the word. So I know what you're going to say, it's going to be in the policies, but just be good to highlight it now.
Thank you, Chairman. No, it is a good question. I think for the purposes of the vision, we talk about offering a range of housing that meets local needs. Now, an element of that is going to be market housing, an element of that is going to be affordable housing, some of it's going to be housing that's sort of more geared up for older people, some of it's going to be care, some of it's going to be 1 bed, some of it's going to be 5 bed. It's going to be a variety of different housing accommodation types that are going to meet the need of the district going forward. The specifics of the percentages that we try and secure from development is a matter for policy. And of course, when it comes to something like that, whereas the vision can be quite high level, the policy not only has to be specific, but it has to have evidence behind it as well. So we'd be looking again at the viability and housing need to the housing market assessment to make sure that if it is 30% and we carry that forward, we've got the evidence to justify that, or do we need to change it? That might be something that we need to explore with the committee at the right point.
Thank you, Chairman. Very comprehensive debate there on some very small points, but it goes to prove that we need to make sure that we get it right. Suggestion that Gary makes Mr. Gowan makes the amendment circulates to the committee, so you are happy with what you've recommended, and I think Mr. Ford's going to cover that in the recommendation. I've got no further comments. Obviously, it may be that Cabinet have comments when it comes to us, but obviously I can't speak for my colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. The one last, before I go back to Ian Ford. On members' briefing, subject was raised to look for dedicated sites for offsetting for the biodiversity, and again, which again, that will probably be a policy matter as opposed to, but I think it would be quite good to include that in the vision because it's something fresh, and I'd rather not see biodiversity and again leave the district, but stay in the district in one form or other, as opposed to be, because the first option is to deliver on site, second option is to deliver them elsewhere, and the third option is to pay for credits to be delivered in Scotland or whatever, as long as it's within the UK. So I think that would be quite good to include that in the vision, because that is something new, and that will be an additional thing. Gary.
Thank you, Chairman. We've attempted to include it to an extent, but I'll take your views on whether we've gone far enough. So in the very last paragraph, page 54, before we get into the 1 to 11, throughout the district's countryside and farming communities, a diverse variety of employment and leisure opportunities will have grown up in support of the rural economy, with significant investment in the long-term sustainability and stewardship of the environment, including habitat creation to support the requirements for biodiversity net gain. So it's covered, but I'm happy to consider any ways that we might be able to bring that out a bit stronger if that's what members think.
If we could be more specific, that would be quite good. And again, if you're going to circulate a revised wording that Ian's going to talk about, I'll be happy with that. And I've seen people nodding down the table, and it's something that's happy to leave in your hands. So I'll go to Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, if I could just refer members to your recommendations on page 48, and I'll start off at recommendation B. The first few words of that are considers and comments on. Well, that's exactly what the committee has done this evening. So I would suggest possibly taking those words out and replace them with the word endorses. Then I would suggest the addition of a new C, which would be authorises the Director of Planning to circulate to the members of the committee for their comments the additional suggested or alterations to the vision and objectives made at the meeting. And then a new D, which would be further authorises the Director of Planning in consultation with the Chairman of the committee to approve those additional additions, alterations to the local plan vision and objectives, having taken the committee's further comments into account. And then the original C would be renumbered E, and the original D would be renumbered F.
I think that's very sensible comments and alteration. Members, are you okay with that? Excellent, yeah. Hold on, yeah, can you capture that? So I'll go to, would anyone like to propose that we take the councillor? Councillor Chapman, you want to come in?
Can I ask why Brighton Sea isn't under seaside towns?
I tell you, that wasn't part of the levelling up fund.
No, it's a very good question, Councillor Chapman. I think when we developed the vision for the local plan originally, we were trying to sort of create a bit of a distinction between those coastal settlements on the east coast, where there's very much an emphasis on tourism, which is why Harwich is in a separate one, because it's sort of less about tourism, more about industry and the port. Whereas Brightlingsea doesn't quite fit in the same way as those sort of coastal towns, but it is an important part of the rural part, sort of the semi-rural part of the district. So areas like Manningtree, Lawford, Mistley, Brightlingsea, and when we talk about the rural heartland of the district, we built a vision around that. Now, in the spirit of we're not going to divert too far away from what the original vision of the plan was, I'm not inviting suggestions that we extract Brightlingsea and give it its own vision. But certainly, when we do our public consultation, if that's something that people feed back to us, it's something we probably best consider at that point.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed, Gary, and thank you for your last question. So going back to the recommendation as amended and suggested by Ian Ford, are we all in favour? I think it's unanimous. Members, thank you very much indeed. We've come to the end of the agenda, almost in time to watch some match or other that's on TV, Mr. Ford, is it? Thanks so much for your attendance. Attendance meeting closed at 35.